Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Peter Polycarpou, an actor with a long and distinguished history in musical theatre, was about to revive a production that he had written called Falling Stars at London's Union Theatre when the second coronavirus lockdown was announced. Rather than cancelling entirely, the production, performed by Peter and Sally Ann Triplett and directed by Michael Strassen, was recorded to be made available online on the dates on which it was scheduled to be performed live at the Union. I spoke to Peter over Zoom a few days after the recording was due to be released about the production, but first of all I took him back 30 years to when he starred in the original production of Miss Saigon at Drury Lane, and in particular his song Weedoy, which I told him was one of my late father's favourites.
I was doing this last night for a guy called Seth Rudetsky in New York, me and Sally, and he has this programme, and he played the clip from Wogan, which a lot of people have downloaded and played. And I hadn't heard it in 15 years, and it still gets me, and especially where they intercut, because I was never able to see the pictures that were going on behind.
Right, yeah.
And so those Eurasian children in those homes, and the way that some of them were, swaying in their cots, and the despondent look on their faces, and awful circumstances in which they found themselves. I was never able to see that, but I saw it to begin with in the rehearsal process. But then I was just addressing the audience. But to see it on television like that again, and the way they intercut it, it's still very moving and powerful. And it took me right back immediately to that space and time.
Yeah. Still relevant in different parts of the world now, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think wherever there is that kind of... I mean, Vietnam, I suppose, was a conflict that left a lot of children of mixed birth, in one place, and parents and fathers leaving and abandoning their children. But that has happened, as you said, in many different conflicts all over the world. But I do think that it kind of highlighted an area which was hitherto kind of not really looked at.
No.
And I think Saigon really expanded on areas, especially when they talked about the inspiration for Saigon. Claude Michel Schoenberg, Alan Booby talked about a picture that they remember seeing of a mother being separated from her daughter and saying goodbye, never knowing when she was going to see her again. So that idea of separation, displacement, is especially keen amongst, say, people from the Palestinian territories or in other war conflicts of any sort. And displacement is part of that terrible thing that war does to people, innocent people, by and large, those who are not engaged directly in the conflict. And as it were, are kind of, the phrase is collateral damage, but in a very physical sense. It did bring that home to me. It was part of my political kind of education, I think, Saigon as well. I think I learned a lot when I was researching this stuff and finding out about the Vietnam War, about what had happened. I think I was a bit naive before 89, 90 politics, perhaps. And I think it freshened me up, gave me a good new outlook, I think. Being socially aware.
Yeah, I think theatre does that. This particular show that we're talking about.
There's no politics in Falling Stars. Not that I'm aware of. Anyway, no kind of conscious politics involved. Apart from there is a mention of the fact that that we're doing this 100 years after another pandemic. Yeah. And the songs that we're singing were written at a time just after the 1918 influenza pandemic, which killed something like between 30 and 50 million people. Yeah. The mortality rate of that was 1 in 3. Extraordinarily high death rate. And, so I do mention that. I bring it up, and I kind of say that if you think this pandemic is bad, then they were writing songs then just after another one. And not only that, but the 1914-18 war cut again, I say this in Falling Stars, cut a scythe through the population. The people that wrote these songs, I think, wrote them to forget, to people, to get people out of themselves, so that they were kind of adorable little follies that would help people to, I think, look on the brighter side of life and not look back, to look forward. So they were optimistic songs. They were songs that were about, finding love again. Yeah. And expressing obviously thoughts of some of them, like Roses of Picardy, for instance, of who they had left behind in a war environment, but loves that they may have had. But by and large, they were songs of escapism, and they were fun, and And it's not a cliche to say they don't write them like that anymore. They're wonderfully crafted songs as well, written by songwriters who then later went on to become really famous in, either fields of music publishing or through producing musical films, producing music themselves, or indeed writing, some of the greatest songs of the 50s, 60s that we remember,
Yeah, and what you were saying about that attitude, that was what the Roaring Twenties were all about. It was about putting the war and probably the pandemic as well behind them and having a good time. At least if you were rich at that time between 1918 and the crash when everything went wrong. That's what it was all about, really, wasn't it?
I think so, and I think even when songs were being played on the piano, maybe in the pub as well, they were, it was for everybody to enjoy a good old sing-song around having a pint. Yeah. So it wasn't just Victorian parlour songs we were doing that were being enjoyed. Music was being bought in much larger quantities just after, the war. And it was a kind of a burgeoning first look, if you like, at the hits of a new generation of younger, more discerning, more interested people who wanted to listen to music more, especially wanted to buy these songs, which were relatively cheap to buy, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, they were, I suppose, a few pennies if you wanted to buy the sheet music, and you had to, play them from the sheet music. And by and large, they were played in little shop windows so that when people went by, they could hear the tunes.
It was the sort of disposable pop of the day, wasn't it? Even people like Gershwin, who now obviously got a much better reputation. He started off Tim Panally writing disposable songs that were there just to come and go, really, weren't they?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, they were. That's where the birth of the New Musical Express was, in Denmark Street and Tim Pan Alley. But there was a Tim Pan Alley in New York as well.
Yeah,
and the songwriters who were immigrants who left countries, a lot of Jewish immigrants that went to America and wrote songs for a new generation of young people. And by the same token, that came here as well from different countries, from Italy and from Russia and from other places. And they came and settled here, and they were writing songs too. So it was a rebirth, I suppose, of, it was a new kind of musical journey that people were making.
It sounds like it probably a fun process putting all this together, doing all the research. Where did you find all the songs? Were they hard to find, or were they readily available?
No, the fascinating thing about Falling Stars for me, and it's absolutely true, this story, I went into an antique shop before a matinee of a show that I was doing. It might have been in Saigon at the time. It was quite a few years ago now. But I used to collect a bit of music here and there. And so I went into this antique shop and I actually saw this massive music. I've got the songbook here. And I found this old faded green volume of music in the back of the shop, this massive column of what appeared to be sheet music. And I looked through it and I realized it was someone's personal collection of songs from the 1920s. And that's where the songs come from. They're someone's personal collection of songs. And I thought very quickly, actually, after reading the first couple of songs in my head, that the music was kind of swimming around there. And one of the first songs I was listening to in my head as I was reading the dots on the page was When It's Nighttime in Italy, It's Wednesday Over Here. And it's this kind of nonsense song, really, about nothing. The onions in Sicily make people cry in California. Why does a fly? When does a bee? How does a wasp sit down to have his tea? It's a kind of nonsense rhyme, but it was a beautiful ditty. And I thought, that's interesting. I turned the pages more, and I found this other song called Tea for Two, which is from No No Nanette, right bang smack in the middle of the 1920s. I knew that song straight away. I knew the writers. Turned the pages again. I found this other song called Je t'aime à travers les âges, which means I love you through the ages in French. And it was written, the English lyrics were written by Arthur Freed. And I knew that name. I didn't know the French lyricist. Zelles, his name was. But when I read the story of the song in the lyrics, it was, Arthur Freed had translated it to be, you know you belong to somebody else, so why don't you leave me alone? I thought that was quite interesting. It was a beautiful, beautiful melody. And there was another song called Destiny, Fate, Le Destin, another French song. And so it was after finding these songs in this songbook that they inspired me. They gave me this wonderful feeling of, I've got to do something with the writers. I've got to find out more about the writers that I didn't know, and even more about the writers that I did. And so I went away, and as you said, it was a lot of fun doing the research for them, and finding out that then the names that I knew in this songbook ended up being 20, 30 years later, very well known within the music industry. And I thought, well, here's a song, but here's someone's personal connection to music. This would make a very interesting show. I've always been interested in the music of Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
And Charlie Chaplin wrote all the music for his films. I don't know if you know that. All the musical themes. But he couldn't read or write music himself. And he played 3 separate musical instruments, the cello, the violin, the piano. And he got a guy called Meredith Willson, who was an arranger, notator. And he would hum the tunes to him. And Meredith Willson would notate all the music for him. And then he'd put them in the studio, he'd orchestrate them for Chaplin. Chaplin would go into the studio and he'd say, no, too many notes, take that out, take this out, take that. Because he was a man of simplicity, like simple things in music. And he wrote beautiful songs for his films. And all of the songs that we sing, again, some of them, I've got a bit of theatrical license because they're not all in there, but some of the songs, a couple I found in the songbook. Some of them I've kind of moved into the songbook to make the show. Things like Eternally, from Limelight. I'll be loving you eternally with a love that you know it instantly. Smile. Yeah. He wrote the song Smile. Smile, yes. Your heart is aching. Again, for another film of his, he wrote this other song called Now That It's Ended. Beautiful song. And he wrote the words and the music to that. But all the songs that we do are derived from the music that he wrote for his films. And so, as I said, I've loved the music of Chaplin. I loved researching the writers, and the immediacy of the songs were what really inspired me and kind of motivated me to take it forward. I never knew it was going to be a show, really. I just wanted to put it into one if I could. Yeah. And then I found Sally Ann Triplett. We did it at the German Street Theatre. This is about 8 or 9 years ago now. And then we did it again for Theatre Mad. That was Theatre Mad. We did it at the Trafalgar Studios, and it went down a storm and people liked it. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then Sally went away, and I didn't want to do it with anybody else. Sally went away to New York and lived there for a few years. And then she came back not that recently. And she said she was looking for something to do. And she rang me up and she said, Paul, why don't we do, Falling Stars again? I said, yeah, great, lovely. And then suddenly everything mushroomed. Is that the right word? It kind of developed.
Yes, yeah.
into this wonderful kind of energy, because we were just about to do, some performances at the Union Theatre when the second lockdown was announced. So we had one day's workshop where we had a musical director and we sat around a table with Michael Strassen, who I adore, and wanted to direct this immediately when I knew we were going to do it. And Ginger Quiff Productions, which is Thomas Hopkins and Michael Quinn, came and said they wanted to produce it. So we sat down, we did one day of workshopping it, and then we had almost begun our rehearsals when the announcement was made. So we realised that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So someone had the bright idea of saying, let's put it on film before lockdown, let's do it. And we had 3 days in which to do that. So we rehearsed for 2 days and we put it on film for the 3rd day. So it's very much made with love, but with, you have to bear that in mind when you see it, because it's still a show that's in development, I think. We're going to do it on the 8th, 9th and 10th of January at the Union Theatre. We're going back there. If we can, lockdown permitting and no further lockdowns after Christmas, interrupting what we hope to be able to do. So, yeah, Sal is the only person I think I'll ever want to do it with, Sally Ann Triplett. So, that's what we're doing. And I looked at it this morning, funny enough, because they sent me a final edit for it, because it goes out on sale on the 22nd to the 29th of November by Stream.Theatre. And we'll see how people receive it. I hope they receive it in the same way that it was intended, with love and just with a bit of escapism and a bit, I hope, fun.
Yeah, it sounds like the sort of thing that now we would call a jukebox musical, but at the time these songs were being written, that's how musicals were often formed, wasn't it? By using existing songs and stringing a narrative together. So in a sense, it fits with the time of the song, doesn't it?
I guess so. And sometimes we use the narrative of the song to make a scene out of it, and we try and act it through. And sometimes if it's just a song, in terms of there is no real narrative, but it's just a lyric about an event, or if it's a lyric about a moment, or it's a lyric about a thought, then we'll play that thought. And there is no real narrative to the piece. It's really just a construct around the song. So you could call it a jukebox musical. If a jukebox had existed, it would have been one. In one. They would have been in one. And I really want people to know more, people to know more about the writers and the music itself, and something about the time. And I guess some of the reasoning behind the songwriting. So that was really what I set out to do, and then sing these beautiful songs.
You've had loads of experience in musical theatre, and you've probably sung some of the more famous songs of these same composers and lyricists before. So how did it fit in with the canons? Are they as good as the ones that we know?
Well, Arthur Freed, Vincent Monaco, he was responsible for "What Do You Want to Make Those Eyes at Me For?" Loads and loads of beautiful, beautiful melodies. Yeah, I guess. How does it fit in? It's a natural, for me, it's a natural progression. Some of them have written, for instance, Arthur Freed co-wrote "Singing in the Rain," which everybody knows, and was a producer on The Wizard of Oz. So they're part of musical theatre history. Those songs, American in Paris, Gigi, he was involved in those. So they're all kind of really right bang, in my, I suppose, musical theatre background. But I've never been in any of those shows that the writers have written. But I guess you could say they're great source material if you want to find out more about the younger career of these writers' music. Yeah. But they develop in a way which you expect every great artist to develop. They blossomed, they spread their wings in different areas, or instead of writing songs, they became lyricists or producers, or started magazines or papers and newspapers especially. So yeah.
So what is the narrative thread that you've written the script yourself?
Yes.
What does actually link them all together?
I guess really the 20 years after the 1918 pandemic. It's the 20s really that links them as such. And I suppose really, ultimately, it's someone's personal collection inside the book that I bought for 20 quid in East Finchley, on the East Finchley High Street. So that's what really links them. And my love of the music of Charlie Chaplin, who I think has never had as much credit as he deserves to have for the music that he's written for his films, which is truly wonderful and really interesting and emotionally engaging. Some of these writers were compared, for instance, the guy who wrote Roses of Picardy was compared along with Elgar. And, they were... Fred Weatherly, who wrote the lyrics for that, was a very, very well-known lawyer as well as being a lyricist, and wrote hundreds and hundreds of lyrics. So what links them is, yes, it's the span of 20-odd years straight after that pandemic, but it's I suppose it's my link with the songs in the book that really gives it a narrative. It's how I approached those writers, and how I liked doing their material, their songs.
So how did you find creating something for the web? Because you've had lots of experience in theatre, in film and TV. This is somewhere in between. It's a different animal, really, isn't it? So did you have to do anything different?
It's a bit of a hybrid. I think what we did was we tried to stop as little as possible. But when we needed to stop, we tried to make a choice about who we were playing to. Well, the way I figure it is that, and I think Michael Strassen was very helpful with this, that the person pointing the camera is the person who bought the ticket that can't go to the theatre. So when I first come into an empty theatre, the way that our film opens, there is no one there. I have a book, and I want this book to be open. And as I open it, I then see the camera, and the camera is the person who wants to see what's on my mind and and hear what's in the book. So we try to make choices about where we play, how we play, and who we play it to. But there are other times, more intimate moments, where we're playing to each other and we're in a scene. So we're shooting it, and we're shooting it from the third person, as it were, watching the scene. And they will be someone seeing the interaction between the two of us. But then we're directly interacting with our audience. So we've got 2 or 3 different, I suppose, links with the audience. And they're it's not necessarily a live performance, because it does stop in places and we have little blackouts. For instance, there's a moment where I play a little jazz version of Smile on the piano. And we cut from that to a song, Yes, We Had No Bananas, which couldn't be more different. So I've got to get up from the piano and I've got to move over. So we'll have a cut there, or we might have a cut somewhere else where we want Sally to do, to change from one costume into another and do a song from a different person's perspective in a different place. But you couldn't do that in the theatre. You have to make the transitions work. Fiona Laird calls them gazintas. This bit goes into that.
Yeah.
And so, but you don't have to really do the gazintas if you've got that camera there that can give you that, really. You can give you the cut, or it can give you the look, or it can give you the cutaway into that look, so that when you do the look, you've done the cut and you're in a different scene. You're somewhere else. But we haven't used any fancy backdrops or cutaway shots into live audience or into anything. It's very, very simply staged. But we do have, I think, an atmospheric staging. And the design is very interesting by Jean. And it's terrific, I think. Well, I'd watch it.
And it was actually performed. You performed it on a stage, did you? So you were in the same room acting together for possibly the first time for a long time, is it?
Yes, but socially distanced. We did keep that protocol, and we did, distance and wear masks during rehearsal. So we were, and things were cleaned and around us, and all that sort of stuff was going on. So it had to be. But we were performing on the Union stage as we would have been if and when we do it live. So the set will be the set that we would use, I would imagine. We may have some more lights. It may be slightly more complicated. But, yes, we tried to bring the theatre to the viewing audience. But we also, have to acknowledge that we have a camera. We have 3 cameras, and we can use those cameras. Sally can be talking to one, and I can be talking to another, and then we can talk to each other. But, there are advantages to doing the theatre that way. However, what you do miss, and I say this, I'll probably get shot for saying it, is, I miss a live audience. For me, the show will only be complete when there's an audience to see it. It won't be complete in someone's home, because they might be eating a bag of crisps and, or get some biscuits out halfway through a song and walk out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a lot of people are saying the same. A lot of performers in particular, they're saying they miss that live audience. And another thing I've thought of is even a socially distanced audience, if they're scattered about an auditorium, they don't respond the same. I think particularly with comedy, but I think with anything, people are there to respond as a group, aren't they? Not as individuals scattered about.
Have you seen a socially distanced performance? Have you been to a theatre? I
haven't, no.
No.
The last time I was at the theatre was back in March. So
I rest my case. I don't know what I can't. Well, it's. I think people who are in the vanguard are trying to bring theatre to the public now. It should be applauded, but it just is not the same, and everybody knows that. I think what they're trying to do is say that we are still viable, and that is true, and we can bring some enjoyment to people, and we're trying in the most extreme circumstances to do that. But until this, we do have wonderful news with the vaccines that are ahead of us. Until those vaccines have been given to the majority of the people who are more likely to be infected and infect others, then we're not going to see normality return. And I was talking to a doctor last night on this show as well, who said that probably won't be until this time next year. Because there are so many tens of millions of people that need to have this vaccine, and not just once. They need to have it once, and then 3 weeks later they need to have another. So until that actually happens, physically, you can't get around 30 million people with a needle in that space of time. It just doesn't work. And you've got to keep it. Yeah. You've got to keep it in certain temperature regimes, and that's going to take time. So, yes, we've got great news, but we've still got months and months ahead, I'm afraid. I hate to be a prophet of doom, but of this terrible, kind of cataclysmic and catastrophic time for the theatre.
Looking on the brighter side of what's happened, though, if there is one.
Well, I just gave you one.
All of these types of things, live streaming and recordings over the web. This is something that's the technology and the availability of it's massively increased. So even when we got live theatre back, this could be another stream for theatre. It could be another outlet. And it's been getting some local theatres attention around the world as well with audiences that they couldn't have dreamed of if they'd have come to them.
Couldn't agree more.
There is a potential bright side, isn't there?
I couldn't agree more. You're absolutely right. David, it's going to be a new, what's the correct word for it? It's like a new limb, if you like, in the body theatre. Because we'll be able to stretch our arms into thousands of miles around the world and say, look, here's our show from Northampton. Here's our show from Leeds. It's a fantastic production. Look how it's been reviewed marvelously. Here are the 5 stars. Watch it. And, we can advertise it and we can sell it to people all over the world. And that's a fantastic thing. Yes, because it does bring new audiences together. And you've got people like Stream.Theatre who are very new, young company that are doing this kind of work. But I'm sure there'll be others. You've got the Old Vic and the National and the RSC already doing it in-house. And, that will happen more and more, I think. And the more local theatres that can develop their own techniques and, I think, get their artistic directors and their directors that are directing plays involved in that, I think it's very exciting, actually. Yeah, it is a very, very interesting and, I think, optimistic kind of a way forward for those theatres that may take many months to come back properly, as it were. You've got those empty theatres, so we could rehearse easily, socially distanced. That's fairly easy to do. That can work. And then you can record and play that musical, whatever it might be, and record it interestingly in a way that I think, directors can follow through with their good ideas about how to shoot something without an audience, because I think that's also, one of the keys is that what you've got to find is a way of acknowledging the fact that there is no one in the theatre at the moment. I think if you do that, then you've got something quite interesting. If you're just playing it to an empty house, then I think it's kind of, for me, that doesn't quite work because there isn't the audience to react to it. But if you acknowledge the fact there is an empty house and you're actually doing this for a camera because there's an empty house, then I think you've got something quite interesting going on.
Yeah, I know things are very uncertain at the moment, but I've got to ask, have you got any plans for the show or for yourself for if things do get back to normal?
Have I got any work, you mean?
Well, basically, yes.
I can be honest with you and I can say I've been incredibly lucky. I do a lot of voice work and I do video games. So I do Assassin's Creed and a couple of other ones.
You've done the Harry Potter ones, haven't you?
I've done Harry Potter, yeah, and James Bond and, so that kind of has kept me going here and there. I've been very lucky to be able to do a couple of radio plays and even did shoot an independent film recently, written by this young Greek Cypriot writer called Sav D. Michael. This film called Bezonians, which is set in North London in Hornsey. Fascinating. You can look it up. It's because it's being released quite soon. And those things have kept me in work. But as for the future, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hoping that we'll be able to, I think Broadway World or Broadway HD, I think they're called, not sure what the difference is, to be honest with you, are interested in buying it and putting it on somewhere. And I think there is another company interested in buying it too. So it would be nice if it was played elsewhere. But I don't have any. The only thing that work-wise was looming for me was working with Bartlett Sher again in a new production of Man of La Mancha, which we rehearsed recently, a socially distanced, completely new version, David, and nothing to do with the English National Opera one that we did. So Bartlett's got some very, very interesting ideas there and working with some fantastic people, Clive Rowe and Jenna Russell, and fantastic tenor, Ronaldo Villazon. And he played Don Quixote, and I played the part that I played at English National Opera, Sancho Panza. And he's fantastic. I mean, he's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. He was wonderful, Don Quixote. And we had, as I say, Clive Rowe, Jenna Russell. Melanie Labarry played Maria in it, and she's wonderful too. And Debbie Currott. But I just so enjoyed working with Ronaldo as well. And we rehearsed in Hampstead, completely socially distanced. And that would have been next year in Vienna. But that ain't going to happen now. I can't see that happening. So that was the only new job that I had on the horizon.
Right, and that's gone.
And that's gone now. It might come back. And as I said, I've been incredibly lucky. I'm luckier than most.
You also do some teaching as well, don't you?
I've been teaching for many, many years, David. I've just done a workshop of Sweeney Todd, which, as you know, I was in the production of at the Adelphi in Chichester. And I've taught at this school a couple of times now. I do teach in a wonderful school in the Wirral, but I taught all over the country doing various musical theatre workshops and acting workshops. And I absolutely adore working with young people and their ideas and how they approach the work. because I think they always have fantastic ideas, and they're much better than older people's ideas. So I just love seeing how they develop and work, and I like bringing some of my experience to try and, I suppose, help what they do. But by and large, my teaching process is really just how I work myself, and I just kind of talk about how I work, the sort of work that I do to prepare for a performance. And if that informs the way they do theirs, all well and good. But everybody's got their own method. So I'm just fascinated by how younger people approach work, and I get a real buzz out of seeing young talent. It's wonderful. So working in schools, youth theatres, some adult theatres as well I've worked in, and all over the place, in Cambridge and Oxford. And I adore it. And I used to have this little summer school as well, which I taught at. We don't anymore because I haven't got the time for it now. And I teach in Michael Xavier's school as well occasionally. Teach acting there. He's got this wonderful MX masterclass, Michael Xavier masterclass. And they've got this Sunday where all their students come in and they do separate classes during the day. And it's very difficult at the moment, obviously, for all drama colleges and training colleges where you're doing courses for acting, because it's so hard to, a lot of them are not able to get teachers in. And, I love it. I do adore teaching. Yeah.
So in one line, why should people tune in to this recorded broadcast?
Because it's a glimpse of the beautiful forgotten melodies from another galaxy. And it's a kind of way of, having a bit of escapism and enjoying some lovely old crafted, beautifully written songs from a bygone era.
That was Peter Polycarpou, who wrote and performs alongside Sally Ann Triplett in Falling Stars, a 60-minute online live stream to be performed at 7:30 p.m. from Sunday the 22nd to Sunday the 29th of November 2020, plus 2:30 p.m. matinee performances on Saturday the 28th and Sunday the 29th. Tickets are £15 plus booking fees, available from www.stream.theatre.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.